This is the overview for Lesson 4, Properties of Liquids. After reviewing the previous lessons, you will start a discussion of compounds and then molecules. Next, you're going to discuss the properties of liquids and compare and contrast those with solids that have been discussed in previous lessons, and start a class properties of liquids poster. The next thing you're going to do is discuss melting points. And an experiment you will do here is you will show this using Fields metal, which is a metal that has a melting point at about 140 degrees. Because you are dealing with very hot water, this is something that you will need to do as a demonstration and watch students very carefully with to prevent any type of an injury. I've warmed up some water in the kettle that's included, and I'm going to place some of that into a cup. You'll put the metal into the cup at that point, and then students will be able to see how quickly that is starting to dissolve or starting to melt. Again, you're dealing with very hot water, so you don't want students to do that part unattended. If you do decide to do this lesson in 2 parts, that is a good stopping point. The second part of this lesson is an experiment where students are going to do a dispersal activity, and they are going to be designing their experiment themselves and then performing it. Of course, this is a good opportunity for differentiation, and depending on your class or certain students in your class, you can decide how much support your students need or if this is something they're able to do completely independently. You're going to discuss several pieces of data, including temperature, time, and graphing, and what to do with that data. The first thing that students will need to do is they will need to decide which are going to be variables and which are going to be controls in the experiment. For this experiment, they will put water into a graduated cup. That will be one of their controls. They'll use the same amount of water each time. They will need to test the temperature each time. That will be their variable. And then they will use 1 drop of food coloring each time in order to determine how quickly that goes into the water. You will also need a stopwatch, which is not included in the kit, or some other form to time with. Students will use 3 types of water. They'll use room temperature water, cold water, and hot water. I'm going to use room temperature water for this. So, after students have discussed all of the elements of their experiment, they will work in their student workbook to write down the equipment they will need, their procedures, and then to record their data and their results. There is a lot of measurement and graphing involved in this, so this is a great opportunity to integrate math. I'm going to start by pouring the water in. And I'm using 20 milliliters as my control. So each time I do this experiment, I would use 20 milliliters. I will measure the temperature of the water and record that temperature. The next thing I'll do is take the food coloring that's included, put 1 drop in. At this point, I would have my stopwatch to start it as soon as the food coloring goes in. And then time the amount of time that it takes for the food coloring to fully disperse and fully change the color of the water without stirring or doing anything like that. Once that is done, I would hit stop. I would record that in the student workbook and then repeat it again with hot water. I can use some of the hot water from the kettle left over from the previous experiment, and then with cold water after that. Then students will be able to draw their conclusions and write that in as well. Again, this is another great lesson for integrating math, English language arts, and science all together so students see how these 3 really go together. In addition to the measurement and graphing activities, there are also vocabulary lessons and worksheets in the student workbook as well.